Good afternoon. I'm Tom Pazdernik. I was a student with Ed Smithman from 1967 to 1971. And after getting my degree with Ed, I went to the medical center to do a postdoctoral fellowship with Ed Uwecki from 1971 to 1973. And then I joined the Department of Pharmacology in 1973 as an assistant professor, and have been in the department since that time. I did spend about 7 months on sabbatical in Helsinki in 1976. So it's really an honor for me to be able to make some comments regarding the impact that Ed and Claire Smithman had on Betty and me during our stay in Lawrence. In 1977, a book was published entitled The Work of Edward E. Smithman, a memorial tribute edited by Christy Brolette, Gary Grunwald, and Barbara Schowen. Claire Smithman wrote the foreword to this book that she entitled Kismet. And in this section, she wrote mostly on the fond memories that she and Ed had regarding the department, which they referred to as their family. She also stated that a phrase coined by Jules Lapidus when they were at Wisconsin best described Ed's leadership style. And that was that he is a master of the iron fist and the velvet glove. If you remember anything from my comments, I hope that you remember that Ed Smithman was the master of the iron fist and the velvet glove, and that this leadership style left a lasting impact on all of those who trained under his direction, and maybe even more importantly, on the University of Kansas scientific community. I first met Professor Ed Smithman, fondly called Doc by all of his trainees, when I was an undergraduate student working in Phil Portugiese's laboratory at the University of Minnesota. Dr. Portugiese received his PhD from Smithman in 1961. The whole department took a train from Minneapolis to Kansas City and then to Lawrence to attend the Mickey meeting in Lawrence. I gave my first scientific presentation at this meeting. After the session was over with, Dr. Smithman invited me to his office, and after a brief discussion, he offered me a position in the graduate program. I still had 2 or 3 years left to complete my pharmacy degree at this time, and after that meeting I would receive a large package of materials from the department twice a year to assure that I did not lose interest in joining the department. His acceptance of me was mostly based on the trust that he had in one of his academic family members, namely Dr. Portugiese. This was the mechanism by which many of the talented students reached the department, making sure that this academic family atmosphere stayed intact. Shortly after I started the program, a postdoctoral fellow in the department conveyed to me that the reason that the KU graduates of medicinal chemistry did so well in their careers is that Ed required graduates to be as competent as chemistry PhD candidates, but he also required them to learn how to apply chemistry to biological systems. Ed created a culture of excellence and high expectation, a culture of success at the University of Kansas. The training program was rigorous, requiring many diverse courses, cumulative examinations, followed by truly comprehensive oral examination. This is in contrast to most graduate programs today that minimize coursework and focus on comprehensive exams based on an NIH-type proposal on the student's own research project. After we completed the oral comprehensive exam, we were also required to write an NIH grant proposal, but it had to be on a topic different from our own research project or our mentor's research. Just before I had to write my grant, we had a visiting scientist from Pfizer Laboratories who stated that any compound that a chemist can synthesize, the body can form antibodies to that molecule if it is attached to a carrier protein prior to injection into the animal. This concept of antibodies interacting with small chemical compounds that chemists could synthesize really served as the hypothesis for my grant proposal. After I presented my proposal to the department, Dr. Smithman said I should submit it to NIH for a postdoctoral fellowship, but first he suggested that I should submit a grant on my own research project to fund my 4th year of graduate studies. I submitted both, and both were fortunately funded. Again, these exercises that Ed suggested were really to prepare me for a future in academics. Ed was an outstanding mentor. He seemed to know exactly what each individual's strengths and weaknesses were and directed them accordingly. In my case, he identified me as someone who had great potential as being a teacher. So one day he came to me and he said that Dr. Higuchi would like to talk to me about serving as a teaching assistant in the pharmacy dispensing laboratory. This is one of the few courses that I really did not like when I was a student at the University of Minnesota. So Dr. Higuchi invited me to visit him in his office on the West Campus, and when I arrived, he took me to his inner office and he first then poured me a glass of sherry. And of course, after that, I couldn't say no. So I told him that I wasn't very interested in the practical side of pharmacy, and he said, I know that, but another component of the course is to provide the students with a brief lecture before each session, giving students background information on the application of physical pharmacy principles to the practice of pharmacy. This was a topic that I was interested in, and it turned out that this early teaching experience was a very valuable exercise for me. On a second occasion, after I had gone to the medical center for my postdoctoral studies, but was still living in Lawrence, Ed invited me to give an evening course to medicinal chemistry graduate students entitled Immunology for Chemists. Since I had no formal courses in immunology, this provided me not only the opportunity to hone my teaching skills, but also gave me an excellent opportunity to expand my understanding of the topic of immunology, which was very valuable for my postdoctoral research studies. During our stay in Lawrence, my wife, Betty, became very close to Claire Smithman. Betty was a beautician at one of the hair salons in Lawrence and had as her clients many of the wives of KU, I should say, faculty and administrators. Soon she started to go to the Smithman house every Saturday late afternoon to do Claire's hair, since they usually had social activities every weekend. Occasionally I would go along if I got home from the lab in time, and those moments that I had one-on-one time with Ed I still cherish today. Claire was a very bright and interesting person to get to know. However, she did wear her emotions on her sleeve. You would know exactly what Claire was thinking at all times, and if she didn't agree with you, she could erupt in a moment. Betty would sometimes come home in tears after one of Claire's explosions. But over the period of almost 6 years during my graduate studies in Lawrence and my postdoctoral studies in Kansas City, Betty and Claire became very close friends. Ed and Claire were really polar opposites. Claire told you exactly what she thought. She could go off on a rant on almost anything, whereas Ed really kept his emotions under control and carefully thought out every word that he spoke. I only saw Ed get really mad once, and this was after one of our graduation celebrations for a student who just successfully defended his PhD dissertation. We all partied late into the morning, and I finally got into the laboratory about 8:45 a.m., and shortly thereafter Ed entered and was livid because nobody was in their labs. He had the secretaries call every student at home and told them if they were not in the lab by 11 a.m. that they would lose their stipend for a month. At 11 o'clock we had a departmental meeting, and that point was made very clear to all of us. Ed and Claire held 2 events every year at his house, namely their traditional Thanksgiving dinner and a summer picnic. However, because of Betty's interactions with Claire, we were often invited to many of the social events at their house throughout the years. If Claire became a bit outspoken, Ed would start to bite his lip and then bite down on his pipe a little bit harder, and then pretty soon in a very stern voice he'd just say, "Claire?" And she knew that if Ed had to say Claire the second time, the velvet glove would come off. I believe Claire played a very important role in bringing out Ed's velvet glove personality. Ed, during his time at KU, had a tremendous impact on both the department and university. First, he was successful in recruiting Dr. Higuchi to chair the Department of Pharmaceutical Chemistry. And secondly, he initiated very important collaborations with Ed Walasek in the pharmacology department at the medical center. This is how I ended up my total career at the medical center. Likewise, he set up extensive collaborations with faculty in the chemistry department and other science departments at KU. Those that I particularly remember are Drs. Richard Sowen, Richard Gibbons, and Ralph Adams. Drs. Sowen and Gibbons were both on my dissertation committee. Ed created at the University of Kansas a culture of success through high expectations and collaborations. He planted the seed for a culture that still exists on the Lawrence campus today. and certainly contributes to the School of Pharmacy being consistently ranked nationally in the top 5 or higher of research pharmacy schools. And I just read in KU today, before I came over here, is that KU has been now ranked number 2 for 2 years in a row in terms of success in getting funding from the National Institute of Health. Very few leaders have the ability to develop a culture of success that is sustained in that organization long after their departure. Those are unique individuals that all organizations seek. Ed Smithman was that type of person. He was very instrumental in creating this culture of excellence in the Department of Medicinal Chemistry that spread through the School of Pharmacy and other programs at Kansas University. So for the current young KU graduates, as your own career evolves, make sure that you always expect excellence from yourself and those that you work with. Learn how to become a master of the iron fist and the velvet glove, as Professor Smithman perfected. And you too may also have the opportunity to create a culture of excellence at your place of employment. Thank you.